you guys are all familiar with this guy, I'm sure, Mike Daisey. His emotionally powerful monologue about the condition of life in China for workers at a giant industrial plant where Apple products are manufactured has generated a lot of controversy for National Public Radio, for This American Life, and for New York's Public Theater, where he launched his project. But who has considered the role of the reader, the viewer, and the listener in all this controversy? Mike Daisey, a performer, emphasized that his show was a theatrical piece about creating a human connection between our gorgeous devices, our iPads and our iPods, and the brutal circumstances from which they emerge. His monologue uses a combination of fact, memoir, and fiction to tell its story. Now, when NPR, Ira Glass, discovered the inaccuracies and the fabrications in the work, he issued a powerful retraction. Mike Daisey's work was drama, but perhaps some in the audience thought it was true. He blended fact and opinion. He used exaggeration, suspense, and many other devices used to convey authenticity through drama. People's opinion about nonfiction art, a fascinating concept in and of itself, and one that has a long history. If we look at it going all the way back, well before the 19th century. People's opinion about Mike Daisey and about Ira Glass are inevitably shaped by their pre-existing opinions about Apple, about conditions of life in China, about the rise of the manufacturing sector there, and about the quality of life and wage conditions. Journalists have been having a field day with Mike Daisey, equating him with Rush Limbaugh and Fox News. Some people view him as an inept propagandist, telling fantastic and highly distorted tales that map onto people's existing worldviews about the human cost of high-tech capitalism. The New York Times, in particular, has exercised its thought leadership on this issue with a predictable and solidly heavy-handed approach. David Carr's piece, in response to this, makes a flat assertion that, quote, "It's never okay to lie in the pursuit of truth." Similarly, Charles Isherwood claims, quote, "Nonfiction should mean just that, facts and nothing but the facts," arguing that theater that aims to shape public opinion by exposing the world's inequities has no less an obligation than journalism to construct its larger truth only from an accumulation of smaller ones. Now, other journalists have offered a more complex and nuanced perspective. For instance, Rachel Manteuffel in The Price of Deceit, a really strong piece in the Washington Post. In writing about Mike Daisey, she acknowledges her own identity as a journalist storyteller. She reveals her own strategic use of theatrical devices in shaping readers' interpretations of Daisey's personality and character. For instance, she describes Mike Daisey's tendency to spit on his audience a little bit during a monologue at the Public Theater, and acknowledges that she is using detail selectively to promote a specific emotional response from her readers. Now, she comforts readers by noting that the information that she chooses to emphasize, selective and emotionally loaded as it is still accurate. He does spit occasionally during his monologues. No doubt about it. Artists and advocates and journalists are different kinds of truth tellers and storytellers, and they always have been. Here's my fundamental problem with the whole affair. The critique of Mike Daisey, offered up by journalists, reflects a fundamental belief that meaning and authenticity and truth are solely located in the text, in the textual object. Based on this, it's easy to play the game blame game by setting up hierarchies of truth, what's accurate, what's less accurate, what's more accurate. But Umberto Eco's Adventures in Semiotics more than 50 years ago helped us understand that meaning is in people, not in text. One of the key concepts of media literacy is that people interpret messages differently based on their experience, background, and life experiences, and it's actually, meaning is created at the intersection between the reader, the text, and the cultural context in which the message is understood. Now, the blurring of art and journalism and advocacy is so culturally relevant today, and it's important to examine how audiences understand this blurring and why we crave it, why we crave work that stands at the intersection of art and advocacy and journalism. Kony 2012 went viral just 1 month ago. Right now, it has more views than any TV show except the Super Bowl. It's the most viral video in history, 112 million views only 1 week after it went live. Compare that to Rebecca Black's Friday, the video by the 13-year-old girl. That took 45 days to surpass 100 million views. Now, Jason Russell and his approach with invisible children. Some people have said, well, he just boils down complicated ideas into 140 characters while engaging people emotionally. That's a quote from Dana Boyd. Because the organization's followers are young and active in social media, the message was inserted into a broad range of conversations across the web. If you've been to the website and actually clicked on the link here, you know that when you click on a link here, it automatically opens up a Twitter feed that enlists you to spread the word using keywords and reference to celebrities like Oprah Winfrey, Justin Bieber, Ryan Seacrest, and Kim Kardashian even, and who then basically spread that message to the fan communities that exist as part of a contemporary celebrity culture. So this Kony 2012 thing, is that just simplistic propaganda? Well, let's take a look at how audiences responded to the news after Jason Russell's mental health breakdown. Here's a quote from a user. Why has the media been so soft on IC? There are real concerns, and even though I'm sad about Jason's meltdown, it needs to be stated the way he's been using outdated footage of the situation in Africa is wrong. He could have taken recent footage to explain these countries are rebuilding. Instead, he used a past atrocity to promote IC, which Ugandans have been suspicious of for years. Critics, Ugandans, and humanitarian workers are not getting a proper voice in this IC campaign scandal. Please represent both sides. Clearly, this individual is making sense of the Kony 2012 video, interpreting it as a kind of journalism. But here's another response. The YouTube video, Kony 2012, is absolutely brilliant. It's difficult to understand why he and invisible children have come under attack. It's a revolutionary, high-tech way of raising awareness and pressure to capture a monster who is wanted for international war crimes. It's a work of genius, which is a game changer. Clearly, this individual is responding to that video as a work of advocacy, as a work of civic activism. And then let's take a look at this commenter who wrote, I feel so very sorry for this young man. Unless any of you have had something so big overcome you and strips your emotional, rational thinking away, then one will never know the pain, the deep darkness that consumes you. He tried with what he could, and I feel very sorry this has taken a toll on him. Here, this commentator is responding to Kony 2012 by thinking about the artist, the young man who in 2003 went to Africa thinking he was going to report about Darfur, and then came across another story altogether. And for the last 10 years, with his with his limited skills and his limited ability and his limited budget, did what he could in his own form of civic activism. Now, for the democratic audiences, the lines between art, journalism, and advocacy have always been pretty blurry. In fact, audiences enjoy the blurriness, and in fact, throughout all of human history, we have appreciated those who could connect the dots between art, journalism, and advocacy. Did you recognize Nellie Bly, Edgar Allan Poe, Mark Twain, Michael Moore, Rush Limbaugh, and now what we do online with Twitter and with everything else? David Shields wrote a really remarkable book called Reality Hunger. He explores the relationship between art, journalism, and advocacy, and he notes that the distinctions between the original and the plagiarized, the pirated and the fair use, the scripted and the unscripted, the fictional and the non-fictional, the serious and the entertainment, have been blurring and re-blurring and get reinvented every generation. Why? Humans need novelty and complexity in order to pay attention. And some characteristics of familiar genres, like journalism, can deaden our senses. The representation of reality needs constant renewal. Through their work, artists try to wake people up. Shields writes, the purpose of art is to impart the sensation of things as they are perceived and not as they are known. Art exists that we may recover the sensation of life. Mark Nash describes artists as double agents crossing back and forth between art and society. And ever since Robert Flaherty made his film documentary of the Inuits back at the very turn of the 20th century with his film Nanook of the North, filmmakers have revealed a fundamental paradox that is true of all symbolic forms of expression. To represent reality, you sometimes have to fake it. Now, we want to engage with works that are symbolically complex, works that stand at the intersection of art, journalism, and advocacy. We want to talk about those works. And we can see from these two cases that I revealed to you today just how hungry we are to share. Why are we hungry to share? Anthony Wing Cosner, in his fine Forbes piece about this, says, the piece is called something like, Why we care about the almost true. And I love that phrase, the almost true. Perhaps the almost true is potent, precisely because the audience has to bridge the gap of truth, and in doing so, become complicit in its viral spreading. The almost true needs us in a way that actual truth does not. This is an established principle of theater, of art, that the audience completes the illusion, makes it more real than real. I think that's an important thing to understand and what we think about why audiences are engaged and what engagement means in the context of online journalism. All works of human creativity are open and unstable, susceptible to a wide range of interpretations. As readers and as viewers and as listeners, we, the audience, are the critical agents in the meaning-making process. So as creators and consumers of information, what do we need to know and what do we need to be able to do? Well, the media literacy community has identified some fundamental understandings that are essential to being competent, both as creators and as consumers. Here's what they include. First of all, a deep understanding of how messages are representations. Messages are not reality. They're representations of reality. And in fact, our curiosity and interest is in thinking about that relationship. How do representations, what is the resemblance between representations and reality? Next up, the big idea that messages use different codes and conventions, right? An op-ed takes a different form and makes its case, uses facts in a different way than does a feature story. A feature story uses a set of conventions differently than a blog post. A work of photojournalism has a unique stance and a unique set of codes and conventions that's different, right, from an amateur on-the-scene cell phone video taken by someone as an eyewitness account. Third up, and one obviously that I'm focusing on today, people interpret messages differently. Meaning is in people, not in texts. Understanding that messages have economic and political power is at the heart of being media literate. And finally, recognizing how messages influence our attitudes and behavior. These 5 concepts are understandings that help us to be effective as both creators and consumers of online journalism, of digital media, of mass media, popular culture, and all the rest. And they're the ideas that I identified in the white paper produced last year with support from the Aspen Institute Communications and Society program and the Knight Foundation under the umbrella of Peter Shane's great big project in informing communities. So what I'm interested in is thinking about how it is that in the K-16 landscape, we support the development of critical thinking and analysis skills, which now include a host of competencies that have to do with making sense of and interpreting messages, and in how we support people's understandings of being citizens in contemporary society through involving them in creative multimedia composition activities. Because there are some things that to learn best, to understand about being a filmmaker, being an online journalist, being a blogger, being a news reporter, there are some things you learn best by actually doing it yourself. And I think that every child, all 75 million of them now in American public schools, are entitled to opportunities that deepen those critical thinking and communication skills, as well as those creative multimedia composition activities. But make no mistake about it, writing policy papers and writing books is not going to bring digital and media literacy to the 75 million American children that are now in public schools. What it's going to take is the work of teachers. And that process is foundationally relational. It's about conversation and creating conversational spaces. And those conversational spaces can be face-to-face, and they can be digital, but it is in relationship that we develop those critical thinking and communication skills. Thank you very much.